I drink till the night becomes another day, and the day's just another little thing in our way. There's something about the way you beat me down that I'll never learn. You're the pint of no return, the pain in my chest, the stain on your dress, the glass in my eye. But this life is a joke, and death is the punch.
Mothers of Mayhem!
Beep beep!
Whoa. What?
Beep
Time.
beep beep. Kids, welcome to Mothers of Mayhem, an extreme horror podcast. Drew doesn't like it when we say extreme horror anymore. But you know
I
what?
don't think SC does either.
He should have mentioned that before we branded the fucking podcast.
We could make it Drew sucks donkey butts in a podcast.
I like it. We're rolling with that from now on.
There you go.
It's
There you
good. You know, in the last episode, I'm pretty sure maybe we told you, I don't remember who we told you we were going to be hanging out with today, but whoever we said that was going to be, it was a lie. And instead, we are going to be chatting it up with a brilliant authoress and actual immortal being, Ruthann Jagge. Not only is Ruthann an extraordinary writer, but her beauty is so mesmerizing that when she made a deal with the devil to gain immortal life, the devil was like, you know what? Fuck it. Not only am I going to let you live forever, but I'm actually just going to go ahead and sell my soul to you.
I think that actually may be the closest thing to fact that you've done so far, to
Thank
be
you.
perfectly honest.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very knowledgeable about things. I could tell you more.
You could, or I could tell some facts.
No, Ruthann is a powerful sorceress, and all of her stories and books are actually enchantments that allow her to take control of our realities, which she then controls with her dreams.
Nope, that still doesn't. No. I don't think she does that.
She does, though.
Do you have any proof? Are there sources to back you up?
I said it, and that's all the proof that you need.
Okay, I feel like that is not how real life goes, but we're going to go with it. And then I'm going to add some facts that aren't true. How about that?
All right. Go ahead.
Okay.
Vomit your lies all over our reputable podcast.
Right. So reputable. Let me tell you. She hails from New York, but lives in Texas.
With the spiders and the lizards.
Oh, and scorpions. There's scorpions in Texas too.
Because she's a witch.
You think so? We got a question for her that is kind of witchy.
And it will only
stop jumping the gun. Don't jump the gun.
I shan't.
Oh, God dang. Podcast is for amateurs.
You may continue.
Okay. She actually lives on a old tiny farm.
Mm-hmm.
And she gets some of her inspiration because there's nobody around her.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where are you? And so she does novellas. She does short stories. Yeah. We have our children today because Ice Rink Gate 2022.
So basically what you're saying is that Ruthann lives on an isolated old farm where she is away from the general population and cohabitates with lizards, spiders, and desert rodents, but she is not a witch.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. See,
so what? Shit.
Yeah. So Did you ever see that movie Return to Oz where Baby Fairuza Balk plays Dorothy, and then there's those scary wheelie things and the clock robot man and that witch who has that closet full of pretty girl heads, and then she can take her own head off and put their heads on to be beautiful forever. And then that one time Dorothy gets into that head closet and then the heads all scream and stuff.
Like
Ruthann, yeah, see, no, like Ruthann is like that witch, except that she's actually very sweet and very nice and not evil, and she doesn't wear dead girl heads. That I am aware of.
Do you have proof that she doesn't?
No.
Boop, 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 boop.
There are a lot of questions here.
I can't hear you.
I
Yeah.
feel like we're not going to get accurate answers either.
Yeah, because why would she tell us the truth?
I can't hear
Of
you.
course you can't hear me. Shh. Anyway, with every podcast besides our children being annoying buttheads, trigger warning, content warning, spoilers, because we will be going in depth a little bit into some of her short stories, and I just don't, fuck their feelings. I'm going to talk about them. So if you haven't read it, that's your warning.
What? I'm sorry. I wasn't listening to anything you just said because I was thinking about what it would be like to be one of those pretty girl heads in that witch's girl head closet.
Also, I may have a small crush on Fairuza.
Fairuza Balk.
Yes, just a small one. She may be like one of the three that I get to cheat on Michael with.
So
George W. Bush, Peyton Manning, Fairuza Balk. George W. Bush, yes, absolutely. Because I like him a little stupid sometimes. I know.
Wow.
Did not see that one coming.
You got range.
I am a classy bitch. And like I said, I either like him in Gucci or I like him coming straight out of the trailer park. Like, it doesn't matter anything in between. Like, leader of the free world who kind of fucked a few
Machine
things
Gun
up.
Kelly.
Okay, first, don't you talk about my imaginary baby daddy. I love Machine Gun Kelly, and anybody who talks shit about him, I'm just like, you listen to Britney Spears, so like we all have skeletons in our closet musically. I know almost all Machine Gun Kelly songs.
Oh my God. Okay.
This is a mover and a shaker episode. Because I've gotten a lot of comments about me being Pentecostal in the past. So now I'm excited to see how many people are like, what the fuck, Christina, George W. Be like, calm down. If you don't want to bang him, leave him alone. Like,
then let me have mine.
God, like, shut up. It's not your three, you idiot. Like, yeah. We're already off to a great start. This is going to be great.
We are. Have you been reading anything interesting?
I don't read.
Yeah, me neither. I don't even know what the fuck we're doing here.
I'm not at all interested in words or letters that combine into words. So
I don't even know how to do that.
Yeah, I'm just like, whatever. I got Call Me Hoop in the mail.
Oh my God, I was going to talk about that too.
Yep, I got mine. Yep.
So I cheated a little because I've read every book in the series up until this point. I went ahead and just skipped to the last two books today, which is Ryan Harding's The Profile.
Yep.
And then Drew's final short story, The Diner, which gives us a better idea of what all is actually going on in the universe.
You want to go back and reread it, don't you?
Fucking scumbags burn in hell. And I am very excited for what comes next. Oh, Sarah, show us the
She
book.
did.
Show us the book.
She knew that I had the exact same one. So she went and found it.
Book.
She said we have the same book.
with Hoop
That's
on the
a book?
cover. Yeah,
Who's
we have
this?
the
Is
same
this Hoop?
book.
The Hoop.
It is Hoop. It's Hoop.
Yes,
Mommy and
Hoop.
I have been reading this. I cannot wait for season 2 to start
Oh
dropping.
my God.
I'm so
Did you
freaking
see who's
excited.
on season 2?
Yes, I did, but tell them all about it.
Nick fucking Robinson.
Yes!
And the professor.
I know, I can't
Like,
even.
and K-Trap Jones.
K-Trap Jones. Well, he did
And
Trap
Nat.
House.
No,
Nat Wiston.
K-Trap. No.
Oh, Drew did
Trap
Trap
House
House.
was
Drew
Drew.
was Trap House.
Because
Yes.
that was the most uncomfortable story I've read in a long time. Because
I hated that character so much.
No, it wasn't even the character. It was when he went to pay for something and his card was declined. Like, that was my biggest fear as a kid. And it's still my biggest fear as an adult, is having this huge thing of groceries and then your card gets declined in front of everyone.
You don't want to know how many times this has happened to me.
Like, it is.
I know,
my
it's
biggest
terrible.
fear.
It's terrible.
But
It makes me want to
happens.
cry.
No,
I
but
know.
it happens. And that's what, like, he's such a dick character, but
I know.
that moment in that story, it makes him relatable. And as a reader, you're like, fuck, I don't want to be relatable to that guy.
I know.
But you are. And I think that's the genius of that story. But don't tell
Yes.
Drew, because then Drew's just going to get a big head.
Freaking laser tits,
That guy.
man.
Yeah.
I know.
Laser tits is the worst.
Fucking guy. Hey,
Right?
What?
I want to talk to the head witch.
Oh, God, that's right. Because you're just going to make things up about this poor woman.
I'm not making shit up.
You're not making anything up.
I'm not making anything up.
Nothing. Not one thing have you
No.
made up.
No.
Hmm. Hmm.
No.
Well, I think you're going to piss the bed tonight, because that's what my mother always said, is why we piss the bed. So I guess we'll see. Marian P update 2022 coming
Yeah.
soon.
If we ask really nice, I wonder if she'll show us her head closet.
She probably will.
Christina drugs her babies, but you didn't hear us say that. Look at this beautiful
They're prescriptions. They're
woman!
prescriptions.
Look with your special eyes. Oh, only if you're watching YouTube, though, because if you're listening, it's very important for you to know that we finally have Ruthann Jagge in the room with us. And she's
After the-
gorgeous.
I'm excited. I've been living for this, because you two are redefining not only moms, but you're redefining so many of us in the genre.
Oh.
And you're
you're
giving
gonna cry.
everybody a voice, and you're giving everybody a platform. And I think, you mentioned the other day, y'all were like 29th on listeners in New Zealand. Oh, just
Oh, yeah. Ranking 39 in New Zealand.
right? Those Kiwis are crazy people.
Plot twist, there's only 10 people in New Zealand who actually listen to book podcasts. And because one of them listens to us, we're 39th.
Exactly. I have been to New Zealand, and they're very quirky, loving, exciting people. They really don't have any boundaries there. They'll do anything and try anything and celebrate anything. So I can see why y'all would fit right into their.
I was going to say, all of
lifestyle,
this
as
makes
it were.
sense
Yeah.
now. It all makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Well, we have a buttload of questions to ask you. Are you
Buttload.
ready?
I sure
Buttload.
am.
Oh my gosh.
I'm always ready. I live on a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere, and you never really know what's going to happen here. So y'all are just one more notch in the day for me.
Woo-hoo! Well, before we start hitting you with our own questions, tell the people a little bit about yourself and your writing career.
It's pretty simple. I started writing 2 years ago in January, pre-COVID actually. And it's kind of amusing because, we always say we're going to do things. We're going to write. We're going to build the ultimate sandcastle. We're going to have the perfect garden. And we're always waiting for someday. Well, there was just a point where, I am isolated because of where I live and I don't have family here. I mean, it's great to have the connection, social media and, the platform of Zoom and everything and FaceTime where you can actually talk to people. But it was one day and there was a writing contest and it was really sponsored by a very high-end publisher. So far above my pay grade. I was punching so high above my weight. But I entered the contest on a whim. I sat down and wrote a story, sent it off, didn't hear anything for a while, got a note back. And of course it was a rejection. And we can talk about rejections later because I have a kind of interesting theory on rejections that people, when I tell them about it. And it was rejected, but the publisher sent me a personal note. And he said, whatever you do, keep writing. I couldn't use story for what I'm looking for. He said, but your raw talent is real, vivid, get some help, take a couple of classes, work with some people and keep writing. Well, at about the same time, RJ Rolls, who now with, he does books of horror, which is what now 20,000 strong on Facebook. I mean, it's been such an influential, cohesive, fabulous group to be a part of. RJ Rolls put out his first Books of Horror community anthology. And RJ has a really unique, neat way of doing things. He gives everybody a chance to be published for a first time, if you're at all readable. And he put out the anthology and a lot of us kind of got together and we started subbing to other things. I took a mentorship with Crystal Lake Publishing, which is a very strong,
that's really cool,
esteemed publishing company.
Yeah, Jasper Bark works with them a lot.
I want to say I did a 3-month mentorship with them and it was a lot of work, but I learned a lot from some of the best in the business. And I would recommend it probably to anybody just starting out because no matter how much raw talent you have, you need to learn some rules before you can start breaking them. And if you really want to start getting acceptances and you want to submit clean work that people are willing to read and willing to take a chance on publishing, it really helps to have some of that under your belt. Now, you're both professionals, you're both educated, you're both trained, you know exactly what I'm saying. You're not, who would have known,
I mean, no, I've got a bachelor's, I got a little bit of education.
Exactly. But it really put me on a trajectory where I found the confidence to start submitting. And I really have been fortunate in that. I've published, and I want to say 22 anthologies, most of them successful. I've published with a number of different publishers, which has also taught me a lot because each publisher has their own way of doing things. Each one has their own expectations of you. You learn about contacts and contracts when you're doing anthology publishing. And then last year I submitted to D&T with my first solo novella, The New Girl's Patient. And it's been out a month and I honestly could not be more thrilled. The reviews have been stellar.
It's amazing.
It is.
People have been amazing. It's a short novella, but it was a natural transition from what I was doing, which was short stories. I think that sometimes too many people go and they just try to put a novel out. Well, that's a whole other animal. And the competition in the 2 years since I started writing and publishing has skyrocketed. COVID brought out the author in everybody. The necessity being time allowance, being the fact that they didn't have a job anymore or they were home more out of necessity for childcare. So many people have decided to follow that dream and start writing. I'm thrilled. I think it's great. There's some fabulous new voices, but it also reverts back to what I said. Now there's a lot stronger chance that you're probably going to get a rejection if you're submitting at this point. So I feel like there was a fairy godmother on my shoulder when I started, because I started before it really became extremely challenging to do. I had the numbers game on my side, whereas you used to have, let's say, 100 submissions. Folks are now getting 800 and 900 submissions.
Oh, wow.
So this is something I'm hearing from so many publishers with their open calls. they have to hire people for slush readers because they can't possibly keep up with the volume of submissions they're receiving. So to go
Makes
back
sense.
to that, and we can talk about it if you feel it's a pertinent point, it really, really helps people to format and clean up their work via an editor or beta writers at this point before you're subbing. I mean, I get a lot of messages from people and they're like, well, who can I sub to and how can I do this and how can I do that? I would only say put out the cleanest, best possible work you can put forward right now, because the market is changing and it is evolving. And where we lost some very strong publishers last year, we've also got some new ones coming into the fold. So everybody's looking for something a little different depending on what their brand is and what they want to put out as their body of work. But gosh, you've really got to be on point anymore. Your chances of getting lucky at this point have changed. I mean, it's a lot different than when I started 2 years ago.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
100 to 800.
And
like
it's
what?
Thrilling. Oh my gosh, there's so much work out there. I have stacks of reading. One of the negative things about writing is I basically have no time to read. I will beta read for friends, or I will give something a run over. Literally, I'm sitting here looking at stacks of books I'm dying to get into. But
Story of our lives.
It's like a guilt thing though.
Yeah.
Do I read or do I finish this? Do I finish writing? Yes, exactly.
I'm sorry. I've got shelves.
Oh, this is just my bedside pile.
Yeah.
I have an entire shelf downstairs and like
You
50
need like a
my
worm.
Kindle.
You're like the redheaded bookworm of stacks over
My
there.
God,
Marian
terrible.
the librarian.
Right? Marian the librarian. I like that.
Oh,
Bedroom librarian, because you always broadcast from your bed. I mean, you're laying like Cleopatra back on the sheets, you know.
you got it, lady.
It suits you. It really does.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm just wherever the hell my kids can't find me.
Wherever they can't find you. And I threatened my husband and the dog's life. This is actually the wall of what was supposed to be my room here on the ranch. My house is 100 years old. So needless to say, it's chopped up. And when Mike and I get a hobby or we want to do something, it's easier for us to put up another building or add on a room than try to make the original house work. Because we've got small chopped up rooms with narrow doorways. I always say it's the best incentive not to gain too much weight because I won't fit through these 2-foot doors. I mean, the stairwell to upstairs is like this wide.
Oh my God.
I
That was
sideways with my boobs to get up the stairs.
I
gotta flatten them
would
down.
not be able to get up those stairs. So I would be a bottom floor gal.
I don't go very often, Chris. It's just when I have company and they want to stay and I have to go up and like get the rooms up there ready kind of thing. So this is actually supposed to be my room. So when I do interviews and different things, I literally threaten the dog and the man if they open the door to this room. I mean, there's like a sign on the door that says do not disturb, and he knocks before. So if I want to get away from it all, I kind of come in here, and then if he knocks, I act like I don't hear him.
Or just pretend like you're talking to someone.
Yes, exactly.
You know.
And there's no longer small children here, sadly. So I don't have that minor inconvenience. So I've got to say, Chris has had a lot to the flavor sometimes.
I can definitely send you some little ones.
Oh, me too.
Love it.
We can fix that real fast.
I would love it. I miss them because they make everything in life seem possible again. You know, we're just coming out of 2 really dark, heavy years. And you listen to some of the stuff these kids say, and they've got the answers, and they see it all more clearly than we do.
Yeah,
and
Sarah's
in a way we could revert to some of that, like, this is what it is. I mean, all you got to do, it's almost a superhero mentality.
Yeah.
But it's a really positive one to embrace. You know what I mean? Because they cut to the quick. I mean, good, bad, or otherwise.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Sarah's decided to tell me that she wanted to be a dinosaur astronaut.
I like
So,
that.
and I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to tell you can't.
No. Mm-mm.
I mean,
I
if that's what you feel like you need to do with your life.
Anything you want to do, and it's something interesting. You know, we're kind of crossing over with Women in Horror Month too, and so many women are intimidated. Well, actually, February, you know, we've got the you know, we're honoring Black History Month. We've got Women in Horror Month. So some people changed it. Some people are just sliding it into 2 months. It's all fabulous. But I do get questions from other females, and they're like, well, you know, I don't know. Maybe I should write fantasy, or maybe I should write dark erotica, or maybe I should just write. I'm like, look, you can write dark speculative, you can write horror. You just have to be prepared to command the respect. And this is something that I've gone into with a few people. Like I say, I started 2 years ago. I have had nothing but respect. Males are buddies. They're my mentors. We message each other. They blurb for me. They consult with me. My husband's fabulous, but basically he'll look at my book and he'll go, damn, another one. You know, he just is into it. But it's a genre where women are still in the minority, but the ones that are prominent in it, oh my God. I mean, they blow my mind. And I also had the conversation with somebody the other day. I think as women, we approach the genre differently. Now, I'm not saying we're more sensitive. I do think that our female spidey senses might respond to things a little bit different in some ways. Male, female, whatever your pronouns are. I think there's so many unique perspectives that can be given to dark speculative and horror at this point. You know what I'm saying? It's really kind of exploding, but I still get other females who are a little bit intimidated, including myself. When I was working on my novella and I was working on edits, and Patrick Harrison III, who PC3. He's badass and brilliant and one of the kindest, funniest, snarkiest guys. I'm really fortunate to have such great friends, like I said. And there were a few scenes where I'm not particularly an extreme horror girl. Now, I will go there if I need to, but I kind of really went there in this novella. And I remember we were editing and I said, is it too much? And he kind of snarkily typed back, do you know who you're talking to? No. You know, like, and I have to.
Never enough.
It's something that somebody said to me 2 years ago. They said, Ruth, don't flinch. So when somebody says to me, what's your best advice for another female author or someone who's identifying or writing in dark speculative or horror, I would tell them, don't flinch.
I love that.
What others are going to think, especially men, because you want to expand your readership. And I mean, yes, I could write twinkly fabulous things that would probably get a following from a female reader perspective. I mean, I'm a big Outlander girl, you know, I could write these mystical things, but if you want a broad readership and you want the heavier readers that are going to read, don't flinch, because that's how you're going to grow as an author. You're going to grow with the critiques. You're going to figure out, do I want to be known as an extreme author, or do I want to be known as someone who just goes there when she needs to? But man, when she goes there, she freaking goes there. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think it's a pivotal point also for what's happening in the genre. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Because extreme is coming into its own, and we all love it. But it's not for all readers.
Oh,
so you have to kind of temper that position when you are writing anymore and figure out exactly who do I want my readers to be. And
absolutely.
It's tough. And also it goes back to the publisher. How willing is your publisher to put you on the Godless platform, to put you on some of the other becoming more popular, but not as generic platforms like Amazon, shall we say.
Oh, yeah.
And from what I understand, and I've only had a couple of experiences with Barnes and Noble, they're very particular about it.
Oh my God, yes. They will be the first to shut you down if they feel like it's too much.
Right.
Even Amazon's more gracious.
They're curating very carefully, which is probably a good thing because it is their brand and it is what they want to put forward. But it's all changing, and it's changing fast.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And don't you think that like the streaming services, and I had this discussion with Mike the other night, you know, the streaming platforms demand fresh content all the time. And so many people are getting exposed to more layers of horror through the streaming services. I like to think that people are opening and expanding a little bit more. Now, see, you don't have kids, but look what you've got visiting.
Ah, my how. This guy is 12 years old, and we've been together longer than my husband and I have been together. So he is almost always with me. Even when he's not on screen, he's probably here.
I love it. They're so dear. We've got a 10-year-old border collie, and she's like an old lady anymore. But when we get frustrated with her, I'll look at Mike and I'll say, you know, day's gonna come. We wish she was annoying us.
I know, my buddy. I think this is a great place, Christina. Ask her your question about her shorts.
Ruth and I did Ruthann and I did a one-on-one, and Captain sucks at technology here. It didn't go, but we talked a lot about your short stories. You know that I absolutely love your short stories. They are
so delighted.
Phenomenal. Wait, Marian doesn't know about them. So.
Well, your story, The Pie Bird from
Baker's
Dozen was one of my favorite stories.
Come on.
I know.
Come on, because I
was so delighted. I was so pleased.
Oh, it's so good.
So you have a question specifically about the short stories, or just
we're gonna talk about all of them, and then I just have a little question about them, just because I want more people to know about your short stories. Like, they're phenomenal. So the first one, let's talk about Pie Bird first. I read it, and I immediately, because I think I beta read it, or I had an arc of it, and I sent you a message and was like, am I catching all of this stuff? Is this, because she's the one thing that Ruth Ann does that a lot of people have a problem doing, is she can sneak little pieces of things in, like little homages, little fun nerdy Easter egg stuff. You know,
I'm basically a very large nerd. Yeah.
She's a word nerd.
Welcome.
I am.
You are amongst your people.
Yes.
But like, Pie Bird has a lot of Poe related tidbits.
Yes.
And for someone like me, when I'm like, wait a second, she thinks she's clever.
And she is.
She is.
Not everybody reads the classics or have read the classics. You know, you talk to these kids now, and when we were in school, it was required reading to read them. They don't read them now. So you have to hope that when you do try to be a little cerebral, or maybe play a little to someone like yourself that picked up on it right away, but there's still a few people out there that appreciate it. Because not everybody can or will, because they have not read those stories. They have not read about, you know, what it meant like to be immured, in other words, buried alive, or what a black cat symbolizes throughout so much of classic literature, both good and bad, that kind of thing. And what I loved is Christine messaged me and she picked up everything right away. And I was like, oh my God, she gets it. She's got it. I'm not like this here.
Ah, that's great.
No. And I like, that's one of my favorite things to do is because I don't read for fun. I can't read for fun. Some people could just pick up a book and just breeze through it. No big deal. I analyze everything.
That's a really
such a dork
high quality to have, though, but that's why you can also read so fast and process and do what you do.
But no, I don't process all the time. I do a lot of highlighting.
Sometimes you just
I hardly ever process.
Right?
Yeah.
But obviously the pie bird is one of our favorites.
Oh yeah.
But there are don't judge a book from Dire Circle.
Yes.
My notes, the first thing is
So
holy shit.
And I get so many messages about that story. It was a very unique call because the call was for the dark zodiac.
Yes.
A lot of people are unfamiliar with. We're all familiar with the traditional zodiac, right, but there's also a dark side of that. And it's interesting because they touch on it in the movie 13 Ghosts.
Mm-hmm. They are my all-time favorite movies.
Yes, they're representative of those attributes and characteristics, which are part of the dark zodiac. So the call was a challenging call. You had to write a story within that framework. And D&T did something really unusual with that call. Sometimes they don't want a whole manuscript, and I've bumped into this elsewhere. They want a paragraph of your writing. Mm-hmm. And they figure if your paragraph can nail them, they're going to send you a full contract for a story. And that was one of the way that one worked.
Wow.
So I had the Gemini, which I am, and the characteristics were so different than what we're used to Gemini. The duality, that kind of thing is pretty prominent. But when I researched it, and I'm a research fiend, it's a character called the Basilisk, and it has two heads, but it basically comes down to, it doesn't really manifest the negative traits unless it's provoked.
Yes.
So I created this character, and her name is Maria Rossi, and she's got a very colorful backstory, and she has a unique set of skills because of her backstory. But you really have to push her. You really have to push her. And I do like to create strong female protagonists. Now, if you read the story, she's actually a little older. And I feel middle-aged women are grossly underrepresented in horror. So I feel it's kind of like one of my missions to get them out there and show them their experiences, both good and bad, make them some of the best heroines and the most nasty protagonists. So I set out to design this character, and I wrote this little story, and it was one of those anthologies people didn't quite get the meaning of, even though it has a terrific TOC and the table of contents and author contents, and the stories are incredible. A lot of people didn't understand what it was about. So just recently, and I've got one of these things where, am I growing the bangs? Am I not growing the bangs? So constantly, and I'm constantly like doing a comb over with my hand because I don't know what I'm doing with the bangs.
Me too.
It's awful. It's awful. So just recently, I've been pointing out the book and the story a little bit more because a lot of people keep saying, well, what are you doing next? What are you doing next? One of the stories, Christina, I've had the most personal messages about was that story. Mm-hmm. And I need more of Maria Rossi.
I'm pretty sure I sent that.
You might have done it, but I've probably got maybe 14, 15 of those. Yeah. I need more of Maria Rossi. When do we get more of Maria? That kind of thing. So that is simmering. That's something that may actually be a full novel.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Well, there's something I've been wanting to do, and it's kind of interesting because it was brought up in an interview. It was a question from a listener. It was actually a live interview going on. It was a question for a listener. If you could rewrite a classic, what would you do? And then I gave my reply to that. And actually, there's a working outline of this, plugging Maria into this character as we speak. So she may come to fruition later this year.
Exciting. That's exciting.
It's exciting, but it's one of my personal favorite characters. And I'm thrilled that you enjoy her too, because for me, she's like, when I started writing that, there's a scene at the beginning, Marian, where she's on a bus and she sees a young man looking to kind of snatch a woman's purse or get into the fence, because she's tapping away, she's commuting to work and she's tapping away and she's on her earphones. And right off the beginning, you understand that this mild-mannered librarian is not what she seems. And once I started writing her, and my husband laughs at me. He's like, well, how do you know these people? Like, do you write out? I usually come up with a name. They tend to tell me who they are when I start writing them. They tend to start taking shape in your mind. It's almost like a handful of clay. And as you start putting words to what you're seeing them do and their storyline, they take shape themselves. So the clothing she was wearing, the way she looked, the way she tied a plastic rain bonnet over her hair when she gets off in the beginning of the book, that goes back to something I remember my grandmother always doing. God bless them. That generation always had one of those little plastic fold-up.
Yes,
my grandma.
In the little plastic
containers.
Yes. Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of demonstrate that Maria really wasn't very smooth. I mean, she kind of just went through life not wanting to attract a lot of attention. Because nowadays, if you saw a woman doing that, you'd be like, oh my God, I haven't seen that in 30 years.
Right.
That's the thing. But I felt like just a small detail like that would be relevant as to exactly how just plain and frumpy this woman was. And she really is one of my favorites. And she's got a lot more story to tell. Yay! And her skills, which she can both use for good and not so good. She's got a real serious set of skills, and that's going to come into play in the novel as well.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I'm just thrilled that somebody like Christina, who of course is going to pick up on all my Easter eggs from now until the end of time, picked up on her so fast.
Yeah. Well, it's not only her, but moving into the next one, Ellie Cinders, Cinderella. I was like, yes, give me all of this.
It's so funny because you're hitting on all I've got probably 3 that are my absolute favorites. Ellie Cinders was it was an invite anthology from Crimson Pinnacle, which goes back to R.J. Rolls and Jason Myers. And they wanted to do a twisted fairy tale. And there's some phenomenal authors in it. I think Kevin Kennedy's in that one.
Yeah.
I mean, a great lineup. Oh, Mike Emmenbach's Pied
Piper. Yeah.
If you don't read another story, read The Pied Piper. Read about the Rat King. I mean, it needs film. I mean, it was just such a great story. But my all-time favorite fairy tale is Cinderella. And I am one of those girls that when she comes down that staircase in Disneyland, I will cry. And I will shove all the little princesses in their polyester dresses out of the way to go over and tell her how much I love her. Really serious. Because to me, she represents so many of us at some point in our life. I mean, I was real geeky and skinny and a bookworm, and nobody looked at me twice until I was 17. You know what I mean? I can relate to the classic Phoenix from the Ashes, the classic Butterfly from the Cocoon, everybody, every girl, every spirit, every feminine spirit has got a Cinderella in them, where we just want to turn into everything that we know we can be. Yep. And to me, she was so representative of that. Ellie Cinders, I decided, was somebody that didn't have it quite as easy, like the classic Cinderella, but instead of the usual minions that surrounded Cinderella, and she does have kind of an evil stepmother and evil stepsisters, but her fans, I made kind of members of a mob. So her mice that run around and buy her dress and do things, and the ones that have always got her back, like the goose that turns into her coachman. You know, he's a getaway driver for the mob, and the other mob guys are like old retired gangsters. And I grew up in an area where there actually was a lot of those ethnic groups. There still is. And you'd see the old, I don't know what you'd call them, the OGs, the old Godfather wannabes in their tracksuits, you know, with the morning paper, barking down the horses for the day, you know, wearing the big glasses, you know, that. So I kind of made them into the form of her special caretakers. Her godmother is a character named Sparkly Ed, who wears sequin pants. He's very into theater, and he's a makeup artist, and he has a strong influence on what happens to her. And then there are a couple of, I guess you'd call them enforcers, that come to her aid, and they rescue. It takes place, and when she has to go get shoes for an event, she goes into a shoe store, and there's a very unpleasant character there, whose name is Mr. Prince, and he's not what he appears to be. And basically, when these beautiful girls are going to him for shoes, it comes out that he's doing really awful things to these beautiful women. So somebody has to also step in and rescue them. And I tried to portray these mob enforcers as big muscle men with very nasty ways of dealing with people, but they're ultimately protectors of these women. They all ultimately come to their aid. So in other words, it was also another case of what you're seeing may not be what you're getting. And it's funny, Christina, because the end of that, once again, I kind of slam you a little bit dark at the end.
Yep.
One of the enforcers named Hamburger Mike. Reputation. And I had a few people like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. And I don't know whether it was one of my sisters or somebody, they were like, did you really have to ruin the story by ending it that way? And I'm like, oh yeah, I did. Ultimately, a lot of horror and a lot of dark speculative does in karma. You get what's coming to you. And it may not be of this world. It may be supernatural. It may be a curse. It may be paranormal. It may be that your life is so irreparably changed that you can never go back to living it the way you did before. But I'm a strong believer in karma. And it's funny, Chris, because at the end of that, I had to give karma a chance to really shine.
Karma came through. Karma sent a fax, carrier pigeon, smoke signals, the whole shebang.
Smoke signals.
It's the most fun to write. And when I write these things, I literally sit at my screen and I sit there and I go, did I just really write that? And then I imagine myself as a reader and I'm like, that's exactly what I had to do. Yeah. I really had to eliminate this person that way. And I really had to make it ugly and brutal because, you know, there's always that age-old question. What are humans capable of?
Right.
You know, always the holier than thou that say, oh, I could never do that. You know, the pearl clutchers, you know, we won't call them Karens because there's males and there's everybody that does that. And I have always said, I'm okay because if you deal with me, karma will get you. But if you come after anybody I love, I will dig up every old evil boyfriend. I will dig up every curse at my disposal. And in that story, it's kind of like those old gangsters who are retired and just sit around drinking coffee all day. They still have people they can call.
Yeah.
And they still have things that happen. It may not be today or tomorrow. And as we know, life is all about timing, but that karma will creep up.
Oh, yeah.
And that's always what I say. And Mike laughs at me. He knows me so well, my husband. And he's like, I'm not the one you got to worry about. He says, anything ever happens, he goes, she's the one you got to worry about. You know how long it takes? I will make sure that karma finds you. You know what I mean? Because you almost have to. Otherwise, there's going to be a huge gap in your life. And how many times do we say, you know, as a teenager, you know, the classic thing, oh, if I could go back to high school, I would never let anybody bully me. Or I would never let those girls be mean to me. Or I would never. When you write, you technically get to do that.
Yeah.
You get to get all those demons out of your past and give them their comeuppance, as my grandmother would say. I mean, they ultimately can get what's coming through them through our stories and through what we write. And that's not to say you don't have little twinges or you're not affected by it sometimes.
Right.
Because sometimes it does stir up some of those things. Like, you know, if you were the nerdy girl at school, nobody picked for kickball. Well, there might come out, yeah, me too. And I was tall and geeky and nobody, I mean, I always had my nose stuck in a book. I mean, I was not the cheerleader. You know, I have sisters who were, but I was not the cheerleader. I was tall and geeky and I always had my nose in a book and I was real intense. And you do pull on those emotions that may be long buried, but they're still a part of who you are. Because if we're lucky, we get to rise above them and create our own future. I always say it's not, it's where you end up. But I do tap into them sometimes with some of these strong characters that I write, especially the females, because there's not anybody I know in my life that hasn't dealt with something. So it's a little cathartic way of getting some of that out. But you're also kind of sending out cautionary tales that go ahead and screw with me. I mean, go ahead and mess with me. And I'm not one who uses people's names in my stories. Other people do that very, very effectively, but I just don't do that. I choose to go with fictitious names. But there are people that get their, they get their karma when you're writing. And that kind of goes back in that story to some of that stuff from my old hometown and some of the things, some of the people. And
the last one I want to talk about is my absolute favorite, abso-freaking-lute favorite is Crisscross Girls.
Oh.
Crisscross Girls.
Bertie Montrose.
She broke me. Like, it is like I could see her on like a ranch like yours, a farm like yours. I could see have you read this one yet, Marian?
No.
Oh my gosh.
And Good Southern Witches.
Yes.
Edited by J.D. Horn, who is a 25-year force in the industry. His imprint is Curious Blue Press, but J.D.'s got a pedigree like a poodle. He basically was one of the most patient editors with me. Mine was the last story that was accepted into this anthology. And once again, there's a bunch of heavy hitters in it. I mean, I say that they're people whose work I admire. Not necessarily.
Got it.
Not
right.
Because they're the most prestigious, but their body of work influences me.
Yeah.
They're people who write like I aspire to write. And Bertie Montrose is a Texas water witch. And I live on a ranch in the middle of literally nowhere. I'm surrounded by fields. Still 1950s here in a lot of ways. My post office is also the general store and the feed store.
Oh my God.
And I walk in there and they basically make the sign of the cross and avert their eyes. But I'm also Mrs. Michael Jagge. Michael's family goes back to real old history here. So they don't mess with me a whole bunch because I'm married to who I'm married with, and it's just a fact of life. Otherwise, they'd probably be tar and feathering me, you know what I mean? Or lighting a bonfire in my honor, you know, with me as the main event. It's just.
I hope you realize that, you know, like every few minutes you just solidify the speculation that you are a witch.
I am Irish, and we do have very specific superstitions. I have 5 sisters. My life is women. I'm very sororal, and I'm surrounded by very strong, competent, accomplished women in my life. And my friends tend to be strong female personalities. I have compassion for those who aren't, and I understand it's hard. But the people I choose to have in my circle are people who are they're fighters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We dig it out, we step up, we do what's got to be done. We may whinge about it, we may have our own private meltdowns, but ultimately they're strong female characters, and I do tend to write those characters. And Bertie Montross is actually based on reality. There are old ranchers here that still hire water witches. There are people that, and it's called dowsing. And if you Google dowsing, it's found all over the world. And basically it's magnetic forces, right, of rods or sticks. And supposedly you do find water sources. Well, I will tell you, the number one commodity in South Texas is water. Where other people have energy concerns and property concerns, everything here is water. Your water is your most expensive commodity, and it's also the hardest commodity to come by, because now it's starting to be regulated because there's not enough of it. And there are still old ranchers that will call in somebody who's known to do this, to try to find out where there might be a source of water, because digging a well is about 40 grand now. So before they set out to dig a well for a property for irrigation in the fields or personal use, they will have somebody come and do water witching and douse. And Mike actually had to try, and I could do it. Because what it did was it took me to where he had the water lines. A lot of it's just science. It's the old copper pipes or the old zinc pipes. Before PVC, there were metal pipes used as a conduit, and especially in agriculture, you've still got a lot of those old pipes. They don't really have any reason to update to PVC and contemporary plumbing. Right. They're going to do whatever gets the water to the cattle, whatever gets the water to the fields, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So Bertie Montross basically grows up in this narrow-minded urban rural community. Her options are limited, and if you read a lot of my short stories, I do write about women whose options are limited at the start, because it's another way that I enjoy showing, no matter where you came from, it doesn't have to be where you end up or who you end up. And Bertie comes from pretty much the traditional, you know, women are seen, not heard, you don't need an education. You know, thank God we've moved past that for the most part. But for a lot of years, it was a prevailing attitude. And there are still pockets in this country where, you know, women aren't advantaged for traditional reasons, because they don't have access. So, you know, people say, well, everybody can take a class online. I know people in the hollows of Kentucky, and they don't have internet access. Yeah. I mean, up until recently, I still have to use satellites. You know, so people that say in their infinite, you know, superiority, oh, well, anybody can take a class online. Anybody can get a certification online. No, they can't. And not everybody can afford $150 or whatever the hell it is a month for these services to bring in the satellites and all these things. We still have a lot of pockets in this country of economic depression, whether it's West, whether it's indigenous, whether, like I say, it's in some of the very rural mountain areas. it exists in this country more than people realize. And unless you extensively or have contact with people, you don't realize it. So Birdie's exceptionally disadvantaged in that. And in that story, it kind of takes in what happens because of small-minded beliefs and what happens because men aren't always respectful of women. And I even kind of, Christina will know this because she's such a passionate reader of historical Easter eggs. Up until, I will say, the 1930s, 40s, women were basically chattel. When you married somebody, and I mean, this, we can go back to as far as you want to go. I mean, you can touch on it in Bridgerton, you can touch on it in a lot of the contemporary dramas that are period dramas. Women didn't own their land.
No.
Women didn't own what was theirs by birth, by marriage. And this touches on kind of the historical aspect of that, where you may come from it, it may have belonged to your grandmother, but they marry these men, or they marry a partner, or they get into a situation with an elder in the family. That all becomes null and void. You don't own anything. And if you don't go along with what the dominant attitude is, you will be persecuted. You will be silenced. You will be eliminated. And people have always said, well, you know, you write with a bit of a feminist twist. No, I am a feminist. I mean, I'm not, I think we all are in our own direction of that, but I will fight for a woman to have a voice no matter what that voice is. And in
basic
story,
human right.
well, exactly. But it's still not happening in a lot of instances.
Right.
And, you know, I'm sure, Marian, you deal with so much of it, I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. I mean, it's a very known form of abuse where you're silenced, or you're not heard, or you are gaslighted, or, you know, there's so much of it. But in this story, it actually goes into more of a physical manifestation, where, again, I try to do a historical throwback to the witch hunts or whatever. And, you know, there's that saying, we are the daughters of the witches they didn't burn. And I think we all are. I think in each of us, there's something that we fight for, to be intelligent, to be heard, to be respected. You know, recently, somebody said, I want to say it was Gabino, and he's brilliant on Twitter. Love him or hate him, he's a character. He's always got an opinion. And he said, what was the worst thing somebody ever said to you since you've been writing? And I will say this a million times because I wasn't very far into it. And I had written a story that was getting a little bit of attention, and a very snarky male said, pretty girls can't write horror. And it disturbed me so deeply, because we fight to be heard anyways. And yes, it's an asset, but like I've always told my younger sisters, your looks may get you in the door, but your brains are going to keep you there. Really, really, really good at what you do. Work harder than everybody else, because you're going to have to. And it kind of propelled me into using that attitude that so many of us still deal with. You know what I'm saying? You're just not respected. You're Mrs. somebody, or you're, you know, you're grouped into these things. And in that story, I wanted to bring out some of that you can go ahead and try it with all of us. And I know I'm sounding very feminist here, and I think one of my reviewers said, yeah, it's another feminist story. It is, but it goes back to the fact that women are magic. The female psyche, the female persona, the female intellect, whether you're born with it or you adopt it or you choose it, it's magic. And how deep that magic goes pretty much is what you do to us.
Absolutely.
You can either get our magic that comes sparkly pink twinkles off our fingertips, or if you read the story, you can freaking call down the elements on it, you know. if you have to have your voice heard, and you can't keep taking this away. So a lot of times in my characters, and even in the New Girl's Patient, my current novella, once again, there was a woman whose voice was silenced. She was told she couldn't do the things she was doing. They weren't acceptable. They didn't go along with the monster she was basically sold to for moonshine and tobacco. It didn't go along with what he was trying to achieve. And monetary, he dupes people out of their money because he shows himself to be an undertaker during, I will say it's the Dust Bowl era, the Depression era, that era where people didn't have money and they had people dying. There was disease, there was famine, and they had to take care of their dead. And he dupes people into thinking he will do it for them. And then the story goes on from there. His wife is given the task of preparing these bodies. And that evolves into a lot of the story. And when she says, I'm going to tell people what you're doing, he literally silences her. So for me, a lot of these characters, especially Bertie Montrose in Crisscross Girls from Good Southern Witches, it's about women being silenced. And you have to go dark with the stories because the history is harrowing. What currently is harrowing. I mean, there's still things going on, there's political things, there's personal things. So I feel as a female that does write in this dark genre, it's almost a minor responsibility, if it works in the story, to bring some of that in. Because they say, well, write your truth. It is part of my truth. It's part of our collective truth. But also to show that goodness and light and power, I still believe, do prevail. And that this is what you do want to embrace. It's great to go to the evil side. It's great to threaten to go to evil side. It's great to present as going to the evil side. But that ultimately in my heart, I believe the way forward is to always look for this little bit of light. Look for the green shoots, as they say, that kind of thing. So you just hit on three of my favorite characters.
Those are three of my faves. I mean, they the question that was going to go with it, you pretty much answered. Actually, you answered pretty much all of them. It's just something.
This is my first rodeo. I've actually done a few.
She's like, I already know.
You guys are tapping into some points that really haven't been brought up. And I don't think I speak just for myself as somebody writing in the genre. I mean, this genre, the genre of dark speculative and horror, is so multi-layered. You can take it in any direction, your story and your character. A lot of times people are recently I've read some things and I've had some people in conversation say, well, should I write to the sub? Should I write to what's selling? Should I write what people want to read? And I think there's a place for that. But ultimately, if you can't create a convincing character, and it's something that's in almost every one of the reviews I'm getting for the novella, you have to connect to them and have compassion to them. And you have to be able to understand them no matter how bad they are.
Yep.
And I think that it's something that if you're writing to just a submission call, or you're writing because you think it's a story that's going to be marketable, you're missing an opportunity to become a better writer. Because you're not writing to your truth. You're not writing to what you personally really believe is what people want to read. And I think if you can tap into that little bit of getting people to care about your characters, as well as crafting a well-written story, the sky's the limit. You can write in any genre, you can write to any sub, because ultimately, and I would really like to get how you guys tapped into this. I did an interview the other night with Tommy Clark, and I was sitting in there when they were actually doing a review of the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and
Oh,
we're
I have
talking about
feelings.
emotional characters and how horror basically taps into every human emotion. And the people that say they don't read horror, they're offended by horror, I get that. It's not for everybody because real life is full of it too. But it's that ability to tap into emotion. And no matter how big and bad your monster is, no matter how heinous your protagonist is, you got to tap into some emotion.
Uh-huh.
You gotta get people unsettled in where they live every single day. And to me, that's a real big thing right now. Do you guys think that's what's happening right now? Is we're tapping into these emotions, and we have
without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's what people are actually looking for. They just don't realize that's what they're looking for. I think of all of the posts that we've seen recently on books of horror where people are like, none of these books scare me. I'm not scared by any of these things. Where are all the actual scary books? I'm like, well, number one, fear is very subjective and completely based on your own personal history, your personality, your childhood experiences, your personal traumas, your mental health,
your personal
issues.
triggers.
It's all about you and who you are and who you've been built up to be. And the other thing is that if you're going into an Aaron Beauregard book or an Ash Ericmore book looking for something that's going to scare you, you're actually stepping through the door into a world of surrealism. That's not our real world. You know full well those things are not going to happen in this world because
we hope they don't.
That would be pretty extraordinary if they did. But for the most part, those are not things that are going to happen in your life. It's the Johnny Athan books, like The Groomer and The Wolf's Den, where our children are taken, where real life predators are stalking your neighborhood, where things that can actually happen to you and the people you love. That's horror. That's where you'll find your fear. And I think people are misjudging the concept of what is scary.
Oh, without a doubt. I think that people gatekeep horror too much.
Oh my
God, Marian tried to get me to read, what was that one that was about poetry, about the missing girls?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Into the Woods and All the Way Through, which is a book of poetry about actual real life missing and murdered women.
So my only trigger that I have in the world is kidnapping, because I suffered from postpartum depression and it's manifested as postpartum anxiety. So I'm moving up in the world.
You now have a new tag.
I do. Whoop, whoop, leveled up. That is my biggest fear. I tried to read The Chain by Adrian McKenty.
Oh yeah.
And I had to put it down. Not because it was terrible writing, not because I didn't like the characters. It was because it was too real. It was my biggest fear. So to me, scary is not a Simon McCarty book and a Sean Hawker book and an Ash Ericmore book.
That's just
scary.
Fun.
That's just a Saturday night.
That's
children.
just a mental roller coaster.
Yeah.
That is
on the mental roller coaster.
It's a warm up. Yeah.
It's a palate cleanser.
It is.
But scary to me is, holy shit, you made me think of my children. That's not okay. And so books like that, because Marian was like, you've got to read this. And I was like, nope. And that's the only time I will have to say no to a book. And it's not because I don't mesh with it politically. It's not because that doesn't matter to me.
Hello.
Hello, pretty girl. Hi, pretty
only
girl.
because of that. Can you go get me the thing for your hair, please? I'm going to be brushing hair as we talk.
That's great.
And there's the other one.
Hi,
There's the other one.
Tyrion.
Right here.
Hi, buddy.
Go on. You look like you're from Kentucky with those teeth.
He's so cute.
In the adult.
The best name.
Oh,
You know how
a little
bold it
womanizing.
is to name him that? It's so fabulous. Oh, I love
My
it.
husband actually named him,
I love it.
and he named our daughter too. Her name's Sarah Ophelia.
I love it.
Ophelia's my
Ophelia! Oh my goodness.
I am like, so you're naming her after a woman who kills herself over a man. That's just what I wanted to set her up for on Love.
Yeah, but he named her after a classic character written by a man. So see, I look at it different. He's paying homage to a master of the craft. I mean, come on. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. I wanted to name her Artemisia Draconia.
That's intense.
That was vetoed. That was vetoed.
She would be spelling that the rest of her life.
Right, that is intense.
She would not be able to spell that until high school.
Right. She'd have to wear like like Carrie in Sex in the City with a nameplate necklace.
Yeah.
Have a lot of letters around her neck. Yeah.
So yeah, that was vetoed. So, Dick Nimmet.
But
Go
I
get me
think
socks.
back to that, I think that, Marian, like you said, and I know your field is psychology. I wonder if people, and I'm not speaking for like in general, I wonder if sometimes people are getting a little desensitized. And I think because of social media and the exposure that we have, the first time I saw the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that was the most terrifying thing in the world to me. This guy waving a chainsaw. When I watched the last incarnation, I was laughing my ass off. And my husband was sitting here going, why are they filming him? Why aren't they ramming the phone up his ass?
Right?
Mike didn't understand.
How the fuck do these kids afford a self-driving car? God damn it. What is going on? I'm so confused.
Like, why are they video? I said, it's a commentary on our current social condition. This is what people do. They're desensitized to the horrors. They're desensitized to the emergency, the catastrophe, the accident on the highway. They're equally as interested or more interested in filming it. I said, you've got to see the satire in this. And Mike's like, well, I would have had that phone so far up his ass. I'm like,
yeah, sure, Mike.
Right. You're that guy. But that's not the world we're living in. You know what I think? Yeah, not everybody, they don't respond that way because they don't know how to respond. Our world is different. Our emotions are different. I have to remind him of this on a frequent basis. And it doesn't mean it's good, bad, or indifferent. But I do feel that in the field, there is some desensitizing going on. It's another reason the extremes are doing really well is because people are looking for the next shock thing. Yes. And I think there's a place for that. I don't write it well. I will touch on it in scenes because it goes with the story. But kudos to the ones that can throw it out there and make it all work. But I do think in terms of accepting stories, they're not able to connect or able to say, this freaking terrified me. Because especially after the last 2 years, people are numb. So they're looking for something to jog them out of that. And it does make our job as writers a little bit tougher. I will be the first one to say it. The first chapter of, we all know what I'm going to say, Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell freaked me out to the point of where every night at 3:00, there's a little window in my little bathroom off my bedroom, and you can see out into an open field. I would close my eyes when I had to pee because I didn't want to look out and see a tree line out that window.
Parrot the fucking parrot. God damn it.
Parrot. It was the simple implication of something so unseen and so horrific that we couldn't wrap our mind around it. But it's like, when is that closet door going to swing open?
Yes.
When are we going to see this dark figure on the tree line? And living where I do, it's a blessing and a curse because it influences a lot of what I do. And it also can get pretty scary. And like I say, there's only like a little half curtain on that window and it looks out into an open field with a tree line. I couldn't look at it. It was like looking in the mirror after Candyland. How many of us want to look in the mirror and say Candyland or Bloody Mary? We do not do it. We do not dare do it. It's the implication of that horror. It's not that in your face horror. And in Stolen Tongues, that freaking parrot made me wonder what was going to come out at me. Whether it remains to be seen. But the psychological terror that there's something we can't wrap our minds around happening, to me, is so much more terrifying than the visceral realities that are in your face.
Yeah. There's nothing more scary than the unknown, the feeling of helplessness, and the feeling that you no longer have control over the situation that you're in, potentially to a fatal level. That's where the fear comes in. That's what's really terrifying. Yes. Imminent risk of harm to self or others. That's scary. That's violence. Like,
just real fast, I actually have to jump off because I have to take Captain Funsucker to school. So I will see all of you guys later. I'm so sorry.
You know what? We're going to pause right here. We're going to take a quick ad break. We're going to give homage, some praise to Godless and Mr. Drew Steppick. And Ruthann and I will be right back. Have fun hauling those butts off to school, Christina.
Farts.
Okay, bye.
Hey kids, looking for a way to affordably access the best and wildest independent extreme horror currently in existence? Godless Horrors is the place to be. Go to www.godless.com to gain access to thousands of extreme horror and splatterpunk books from the genre's best and brightest independent authors. Godless Horrors offers every title in their catalog in a variety of formats to ensure compatibility with your favorite digital reading device. Strapped for cash? No worries. Godless has a fantastic collection of free titles ready for instant download, with other titles in their collection rarely exceeding $3 to $4. Again, go to www.godless.com or download the app and tell them what the fuck you're looking for. Come join the Godless tribe today. Forever delightfully deviant. Forever godless.
Boom, boom. Good, she's gone. We got rid of her. I love her to death. Hey, I am going to hit you with 3 more rapid fire questions. How does that sound?
Awesome.
Perfect. So usually this would be the rapid fire 4, but the first question for the rapid fire 4 is really talking about, well, you know what? I am going to hit you with all 4 of them because I want to know which of all of those female characters that we just talked about, which of them do you identify with the most?
Bertie Montrose, because of where I live, because of the rural oppression, because I'm basically I grew up in a small town, but I world traveled. I've done a lot of exciting things in my life. And when I met the blue-eyed monster that I've been married to for 25 years, and basically stole my soul and got me to move here, it almost did me in, Marian, because it was such a different perspective on life. In some ways it's lovely, it's very simple, but in some ways it's so oppressive and so judgmental, and it was a real,
I know.
Yeah. So for me, Bertie Montrose, trying to rise above the small town attitude that she would never be more than what she was. And there's even a phrase in that story where her dad says she doesn't need to go to college. She needs to go someplace and meet her future husband, and hopefully he's got, land, that kind of thing. I have actually heard that said in the last 25 years.
Isn't that?
It's so disturbing. Yes. But when you live in an area where land is a very big commodity asset, and of course, everybody knows the biggest privately held land in the United States is in Texas, it's very valuable. And there's a lot of choices that are made to hang on to that commodity. So I will say that I relate most to Bertie Montrose, Crisscross Girls.
Why horror? Why horror for you? Of all genres, what was it that drew you the most to horror?
I've always loved it.
Me too.
I ramble home from Catholic school, and I come from a very Catholic background. I tell people 17 years of Catholic school is why I am the way I am today.
I went to Catholic school too. My father's
I
Episcopal
know.
priest.
Part of it's cathartic for me, and I'm sure it is for you too. But I just always loved it. I would sit there and watch the repeats of Dark Shadows.
Me
and
too.
I wanted to be those powerful women that had the skills and the love of the vampire genre. And once again, I was always a voracious reader. And so many, and I had this discussion with somebody the other day, a lot of your classics, like I had to take Latin and I had to take classic literature. You get into some of those mythologies, Greek mythology, there are monsters, there are terrible things happening, there are brutal executions.
Oh my God.
Yes. And to me, they were always so exciting. And then the threat of hellfire and damnation and doing the Stations of the Cross, and you die on a cross with nails in them, and you hear these terrible stories about the lives of saints and how they were martyred.
Yes.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not diminishing anything for anybody. Whatever gets you by, but it was very influential to me as a child.
Yes, in the group conversation that I had with Donna and Nat and Sonia when we talked about like our first introductions to horror, I always consider the Bible.
Oh my God, yeah.
And Sunday school, my first introduction to horror, because there are horrible things that happen.
Terrible.
Abraham and his son. Like the whole concept is built around this man who hears a voice from heaven and is like, yeah, man, I'm gonna murder my son.
Yeah, I'm gonna do
Cain and Abel. He murders his brother because he's jealous of his brother, and then he massacres sheep so that his oh my God.
It kind of like it's the original Midsummer. It's the original.
It is.
Yes.
Absolutely. I freaking, yeah. And that's where it all starts, really,
And
honestly. And same with Greek, Roman mythology, all of it's so fucked up.
It is, and it does influence you. And I think that because I always read so much, and then I remember sneaking around to get a hold of Stephen King's early work, because it was published in like Playboy, and you'd have to steal somebody's magazine to read it. And it was mostly published in men's magazines because I thought we were too fragile to actually read it and enjoy it. And just that early exposure to maybe what you weren't supposed to be reading, because my mother wasn't having it. I mean, you weren't going to bring that stuff in. And if I was watching something on TV, because, you know, not everybody grew up, you know, in my demographic, we didn't have 7 TVs. I mean, you had 1 or 2 TVs and you pretty much watched what your parents wanted to watch. But there were always those Saturday afternoon matinees, and you'd go to the movies, and I'd be so excited about all that. And my mother would be like, you know, saying an extra rosary. Do you think it's also that little bit of the forbidden? That little
heck
bit of
yeah.
You're getting away with something that maybe you didn't have approval for. And Marian, I grew up in upstate New York, and it really is magical. And I say that in my author bio. There's something about the light up there. There's something about autumn, the pumpkins and the leaves and the bonfires. And Halloween was huge when I was growing up.
Oh, heck
even though my parents were Catholic, we grew up in a neighborhood with everybody had 8 kids or 10 kids or whatever. I come from 8. And it was huge. These small neighborhoods would celebrate for days. And we'd have our masks and our costumes, and we'd run around like little heathens. it was a huge part of my upbringing growing up. Holidays were celebrated. Even though I didn't come from any kind of privilege, it was always made special. There were always stories told. And just the fact that you lived in that area, you lived in this mystique of the changing seasons where the light would hit a certain way. You know, so many of the really strong authors come from the Hudson Valley. You know, you've got Story of the Headless Horseman, and there's actually quite a few other, there's a lot of witch stories that are written in that area. You know, Salem is the classic. A lot of it for me personally has to do with the changing seasons and the fact that you do witness the earth dying and you do witness the rebirth. So for me, horror was always, what's next? What's possible? What's in the cornfield? What does that scarecrow out there think about this? You know, so actually it was very much a part of my upbringing or whatever. And the other part of it is it's very cathartic. And I think I touched on that earlier. We can work out a lot of life issues when we write in a genre that allows us to go dark, allows us to touch on, once again, those forbidden subjects or those taboo subjects that maybe you don't talk about in polite cocktail conversation.
We took a deep dive into that one. I had the pleasure of talking with a bunch of authors just about the relationship between horror and mental health. Just both the catharsis and trauma processing you experience from both writing and reading. And why we believe so many of us end up hanging out in this dark corner of literature together, because it's actually a very comfortable place for us to express and experience feeling and emotion and healing, which is really, most people would be like, what, healing through horror? And I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm healing through horror. Watch me.
You find out you're not alone. I mean, I have the most beautiful tribe. I mean, I have met people that get me. And once again, I'm very fortunate because, I mean, my husband just thinks everything I do is amazing. I don't know how I ever got so lucky. He doesn't always understand it, Marian, but he absolutely supports my uniqueness. And he loves that. You know, he's like, well, I lived here all my life and I never went out and laid on the roof and looked at the stars and talk about the things you talk about. He says, I never looked out and saw the stories that you see out there. So he's starting to see the world a little bit more through my eyes, which tends to be outside the lines of normal life's color. And I think that once you find out that you're not alone in these feelings, that there's very much a tribe, a community. There are other people. And, you know, I know everybody from people that still write in a composition notebook with a pencil to people that have got 3 PhDs in this genre. And we're all unified and equaled by the genre. It's the most accepting, intelligent. I am floored by what I learned from people in the genre on both sides, from readers, from writers, from reviewers. I mean, on all sides, publishers. It's forgiving. And I think ultimately, like you said, we're all looking to find a way to either be forgiven or find forgiveness, whether it's our life or something we've done ourselves, mistakes we've made, injustices we've suffered. It's about ultimately finding redemption. And to me, the very best stories allow that little bit of redemption. And it's not like you and I grew up where these crumbs are being thrown at us and maybe you'll get to heaven if you walk this path of crumbs just the right way. Here it is. This is in your face. And if you get through this, you survive this horror, hell, you're going to do anything. Or even if you don't survive it in some ways, you find a redemption. There's a quality to it. Even the most hardened criminal in some of the stories that I read, there's a degree of redemption because maybe they find peace. Maybe by their very elimination or the fact that people stop seeing them as monsters, I read a kid's book years ago, and it was about a monster that nobody would see anymore because the kids had outgrown him. Well, even if you stop seeing these monsters, in a way, you're allowing redemption at a certain point. And that's a big part of it, I think, too. Our community is utterly amazing.
It is. And I think people really don't expect it. Especially those of us who are more into the dark fiction side of things, the more subversive, transgressive, they think that we're all just a bunch of like weirdos, like sick weirdos, right? Like murderers.
Yes.
But it is the nicest community of people. Some of the best friends I've ever had in my entire life. And the most generous and caring and compassionate. It's just extraordinary to me.
And the other thing is, you can wake up at 2:00 in the morning,
and there's always somebody.
An idea of a story. Literally, I will sneak out and I'll get on my iPad and I'll just be like, "What's up? Anybody around?" That kind of. A lot of us tend not to sleep a whole bunch for whatever reason. I think high creatives don't sleep a whole lot. I always say I'll sleep when I'm dead. And that, now that I'm getting a little bit older, that's kind of like, well, I gotta try to pace myself a little bit. I can't do what I did at 25 or 35 or anything like that. But there's always somebody around with an ear. And it's not always who you expect.
Right?
I have some friends, and we just know the other one's going to be around if there's something that we need to work through, or we need to talk a storyline through, and like I said, what is exactly the membership of Books of Horror? I mean, it's phenomenal. It's one of the biggest communities, groups, influences. There are so many people from so many lifestyles that just are looking for a place where they're not the weird kid.
Right.
They fit in there. And especially and I'm sure you could talk to this much more, in the past 2 years, especially in mental health, there hasn't been a lot of help. It's gone to the back burner. I mean, yes, you can do virtual, you can do, whatever gets you by, but there's been a lot of people that haven't had access.
Yeah.
I'm seeing more and more, especially some of the people that started writing during the pandemic. This was their way of coping.
Oh, yes.
And to me, that says so much about, like you brought out, the genre as a healing process and as a process that helps you work through and think through, and knowing that you're not alone. And I have these thoughts, and somebody else might be thinking this. Am I weird because I want to do this to a character in a story? Or, we often joke that if anybody ever saw our Google searches, some of the things we have to tap into are very, very dark. And that's because, like I brought up at the beginning, it's got to be accurate, because there are thousands of personalities reading this or reading a review. They will call you out on it if you're not accurate.
Oh,
Medical group, whereby what's the process if you get hit by a bullet here? What happens there? There are physicians in the group, and they deal with trauma, and they're like, no, don't write it that way. This is what happens to the body. And this is, and it's fascinating. And it goes from beyond being spooky or dark to clinically fascinating.
Yes.
But you have to learn so much to employ it in your story in a meaningful way that someone else might read and say, hey, yeah, I had that happen. And I think that's where some of, like, Daniel Volpe, my boy Daniel, I mean, he's fabulous. With Left to You, he tapped into emotions based on violence, based on horrific acts we all know about, but he did such a unique and fresh way that I think a lot of the people that are relating to it and interviewing it or reviewing it now, it's current for them. They see this threat. It may not be the same threat, but it's the same overpowering heaviness on them.
I think a lot of people, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Volpe about this yet, and maybe I'm, over analyzing and overthinking it, but the whole concept of left to you and this demon, this evil that our main protagonist carries with him out of the concentration camp. Because if you're not familiar with this book, Left to You is set during the Holocaust. It's set within a concentration camp, but it is a remarkable piece of allegory regarding the guilt and the generational trauma carried by families of survivors of the Holocaust, and this pain and this agony and this, you know, facing the eventual like Holocaust denials and all of this, and the way that it has continued to affect them up until modern times. Like there's always, you can always go 5 steps deeper. I find horror is an iceberg, a lot like our own behavior, because all of our behavior has meaning. Everything in horror has meaning. We see all these jagged, frightening things above the surface, but what is underneath the water is 5 times bigger.
Yes.
And more meaningful. And to me, that's
cause and
that's
effect.
horror. Horror is an iceberg.
I had to bring that book up because it's such a perfect example of what we're speaking to, and why horror, and the effect it has, and how it can heal, and how the demons may be internal, the demons may be external, the immediate threat that humans of any persuasion feel, what they're dealing with. Is it real? Is it manifested? Is it psychological?
Yes.
Is it normal? Is it, and in some cases, it's all of the above.
Yes.
And that little book, little novella, hit on all of those points at a level that it's rare to have that kind of emotional response brought out to something.
Yeah.
It's basically rooted in horror and is horror.
Yeah. Yes,
So
absolutely.
And that's why horror, Marian. That's why we do it. That's why we write it. That's why we read it. There are lessons to be learned. There are life lessons. And they're
100%.
That's
yes. Now, that being said, are there any other literary genres that you would be tempted to dive into at some point? Or do you just feel like this is your home? This is where you're meant to be?
This is my wheelhouse. This is what I love. I have been asked a couple of times if I would consider doing other things. I've been invited into pieces of work that kind of went into other things. And of course, you always get that, why can't you write something everybody would enjoy reading?
Because I know at least 20,000 people who are going to enjoy reading this, so y'all can kick rocks.
Exactly. But I think what they refer to is conventionally more acceptable cocktail discussion stuff. My husband is so proud of me. You know, he'll say, "Oh yeah, my wife's an author." And they're like, "Oh yeah, what was she?" You know, and it's so funny because people tend to pre-qualify, of course, but oh yeah, what she do? Put a book? She self-published? She put a book on Amazon? No, like we have boxes of books. She's been published like going on 25 times. You know, that kind of thing. He's so proud of that, but you know, to that point, he'll tell people, they say, "Oh, what's she write? You know, is she writing like the next Lonesome Dove? Is she writing?" He's like, "No, she writes horror." I've got him to say dark speculative fiction because that doesn't scare him off as fast.
Right.
But he's like, "Oh, hell no." He said, "She writes kind of dirty stuff." He goes, he's proud of it because he thinks there's a power in it. He thinks there is, but he also believes that sets me apart. He thinks that because, and he knows my intelligent level, and you know, he knows, you know, he gets this about me after all these years, but there is a power in it. The only other thing I might consider is a YA, only because I love that it's now becoming a lot more popular. That people are allowing and encouraging, and you know, we deal with so much of this controversy about banned books and educational systems and what's acceptable and what isn't, and there's so many people that are choosing to give their children a different type of education and expose them to the work of Neil Gaiman and Edward Gorey and all these other, you know, Goosebumps and the things that we love, things that we, you know, there's nothing like a Coraline. There's nothing like a Nightmare Before Christmas. But I think within that genre, there's still so much room. And I think there's such a fine line to do it well. There is a possibility that at some point I may try something along those lines. But in terms of any other genre, I'm going to say no. I'm just not into fiction. I am not into nonfiction. I just don't have the interest. In order for me to craft the characters and tell a story, there's going to have to be a little bit of an element in there of darkness or contemplation or horror.
I personally would love to see you do some YA horror. I would give those books to my children in a heartbeat. I love that YA is becoming more dark and more confrontational, because I think for quite a few decades, our adolescents and our children were authors were taking their ability to process and to handle heavy stuff for granted. They were minimizing.
It was whitewashed. It really
was. We were babying them. And especially now, after all of the trauma that we have as a society and a culture have experienced over the last few years, these kids are looking to go into something that's going to force them to confront heavy stuff, to confront their feelings, to confront their fears, because they've already lived in terror.
Well, we've inflicted it on them. We have inflicted it on them. And now everybody's like, it's kind of like, you know, there's that great line. I love the book and I love the movie Cold Mountain. And there's that great line, Reese, who was it? You know who I mean? Oh, not Reese Witherspoon, the other one. Renee Zellweger.
Yeah.
It's dealing with the Civil War. And she says, you know, they make it rain and then they wonder why they're wet. They cause this war and then they wonder why this is happening. And I think in essence, we caused this, and now our children are acting and reacting and acting out and not knowing. I mean, I've seen it in my own family. I've seen it with the kids in college. I've seen it with so much of it. My friends that are educators and professors, they are struggling right now. And when we say YA, it can mean anything from elementary up. I know J.C. Alexander put out that Attack of the 3D Zombies recently.
Yes.
Teacher, and oh my God, I love it. I want my niece to read it when she's a little bit older. I mean, basically, the cautionary tale in that is, this is what can happen if you sneak off to go to the movies when your parents tell you not to. You may spy zombies because the zombies come alive because of some event or something. But I think that it's a genre that right now in particular needs to be explored. And I'm thrilled that it is opening up. They did just proclaim that there will be a Stoker Award issued in that middle grade genre going forward.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's recent. I want to say within the past month or so. And I know all the awards are controversial and we can get it, you know, that's a whole other
whatever. Let's celebrate people however we can.
Exactly. And it's you know, the fact that they created that category to me was huge. It shows there's a need. It shows that it's why people want to read in that. D&T is kind of in the forefront. I give Dawn all the credit in the world.
Oh my God, Dawn Shay.
She's got young kids. She put a call out recently. Send me what your kids are writing. Send me what your kids are drawing. Let's explore this. Let's give them a platform to show them that this is available to them. Because like you said, there were several generations that were whitewashed with superheroes. Now there's a place for superheroes too. Because everybody needs to believe that there's somebody who's going to swoop in and save them, even though my personal superhero is, of course, the dark, conflicted Batman, always will be. I'm actually looking forward to Robert Pattinson. I think he's going to kill it because he's moody AF, you know what I'm saying? the role justice, especially after seeing The Lighthouse and some of his other lesser known movies.
Oh my God, that movie. Oh, blah, 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 blah.
Right. I think he's going to give us a superhero that is even more conflicted than what we've already been exposed to. So I do think there's a big place for all that. I will say that I think some of it started with Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead. The parents that have allowed their children to dip into some of that. Let's take it back even more. Let's go to Harry Potter. There's a lot of bad stuff in Harry Potter.
Oh yeah.
And everybody wants to, jump on the political bandwagon. And yes, we've all got our opinions about JJ and everything else. But here's the thing. Twilight, Harry Potter, they got kids reading again. They got them reading. There were 2 generations of kids that didn't read. These books, no matter how dark they are, no matter what the subject matter is.
The Hunger Games.
Yes, they got kids reading. It's great to throw Lord of the Rings at them and say it's a classic.
It's hard though. It's hard. That's heavy.
There's a lot of descriptive stuff in those books, and I mean, it's a beast to plow through.
Kids want action and adventure and something that's going to be light and easy to follow and exciting.
They really tried to take away Lord of the Flies. They've tried with these things, and they're going to continue to try. But what they're missing is when you expose kids to these alternate universes and these immediate threats. And I've always said The Walking Dead, and somebody said something so funny the other day. I've watched it since the beginning, and it's gotten so awful. It's the end. But somebody said the other day, I'm going to fly that plane right into the mountain, and I am too. I'm going to watch it right to the very end. It's not about the zombies. The zombies are the secondary threat. It's the interpersonal relationship between humans in unnatural settings, or immediate or threatening or horrific settings.
Yes.
The horror, the fiber of their lives has been uprooted.
Yes.
How are people reacting? Who are the monsters? Are they these creatures that are walking around that we assume are dead? Or are they the living humans that are not able to cope with the changes?
Oh my God, yes.
So
this is why I loved Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House so much, because that really, yes, there are some visual scaries that happen in there, but it's about family trauma. It's about interpersonal dynamics, mental illness, substance abuse, and same with Midnight Mass. As 2 Catholic school graduates, you and I could probably talk about that one for hours. My father is an Episcopal priest. He and my sister sat around and talked about that show for legit 2 hours. Because
I believe it.
Of the way that, yes.
There's another one, and it was on HBO, and they're actually doing a second season. It was 30 Coins.
I haven't had a chance to watch that one yet.
Oh my God. That's heavy connected to Bible passages. Heavy symbolism. It was in Spanish with English symbols. It is so well done. It topped the charts in Europe, and we started watching on the HBO when it was on. The last episode of the first season pushed every boundary of television in the way they portrayed the devil coming into this small town. I couldn't believe how graphic the violence and how visceral the blood and the sacrifice and everything was in that last scene. Once again, it goes back to our previous conversation. That might be one that you kind of suggest to your dad. It's ultimately horror is good versus evil.
Yes.
Like so many other things. It's the ultimate lesson of good versus evil. And it's not always what you think. It's not always good that is the one that you want to walk that path with. I'm gonna give a little prop here, and I can't say too much because it's just starting to come out. There's an incredible duet coming out in June. Eleanor Mary put this together last year, and it was by invitation. And it's The Death of a Soul, and it's sin and virtue. And if you look at my page and you kind of see some of these other, and the table of contents, the author content is mind-blowing. It was extremely challenging to write, but it's exactly what we're talking about. Whereas what you see as good may not be where you want to walk. What you see as evil may not be the one to shy away from. It was a very challenging story to write, and it's 10,000 plus words. So I mean, you're going to get 2 books, but they're basically short novellas. There's 14 authors. And when you see the lineup, it's going to blow your mind.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Fortunate. It's just released. Look at the cover. I'll send you the covers on my page.
Yes.
You are going to want this arc, but it's exactly what we're talking about. And Eleanor Mary's OG. I mean, she was writing her first, she did zombies before they were hot. She did this, world thing. She also writes under a pen name as Ella Burns, and she writes some of the most dark, twisted. If you haven't read They Call Me Teddy, it is, it's mind-blowing. It's generational, it's serial killers, it's incest, it's ugly, it's the whole 9 yards. Eleanor's not afraid to go there. But when she puts out something like this, and she does it more rarely than she used to, I've published with her before, this one's going to be a monster, but it's basically good versus evil. And I think when you talk about horror like we've been doing, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
But evil may not always be the bad thing.
Yeah.
The evil may be what you need to resort to in order to survive. And I think, and we're going to mention Trad Bernie here. I mean, his very favorite movie where we can't say the name that cannot be spoken. We're going to talk about the witch. You know what I'm saying? It's about embracing what you need to embrace to survive. And I read a wonderful analyzation of that film, and of course it's one of my favorites for the way it's filmed. Everything. I believe, yeah, he's done a few other really impressive ones too. I think it's the what is it, the Croning or something most recently. Same director. She followed that path, and it goes back to the puritanical, to the manifestation of every time they said she was the only one that looked back when the family was leaving. And the fact that she looked back on her own life when they were leaving was enough for the devil to see she had doubts about her faith. And the fact that he swept in the form of Black Phillip at that point, because she, the young woman, was the only one. And I watched the movie again to see this point. It was a very cerebral discussion. It was like somebody was analyzing it. She's the only one who looks back when the family is driven out, because she had regrets. She wanted the comforts of her life. Do you want to wear pretty dresses? Do you want to taste butter?
Yes.
She was the only one whose faith was not steadfast. And as we all know, she's the one that embraces it and ultimately is the survivor where others fail because of it. So it's not always the darkness, the light that will allow you to survive. Your situation may have to resort to some pretty ugly or unacceptable things in order for you to go forward, in order for you to survive and thrive. And it may be in a different form. You may shed your skin. You may, levitate and fly up with a whole new bunch of girlfriends, but you have to go towards something, but ultimately it's good versus evil.
One of the most impactful quotes I've ever heard or read was actually attributed to Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satanism.
Right.
And he said that their whole philosophy revolves around the fact that God loves you because of what you do. The devil loves you in spite of what you do.
Oh.
And I always thought, I was like, well, sign me up. I'm in.
They have to find the perfect relationship for everybody.
at their core.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
yes.
there's no greater meaning to unconditional love. And you
there
know,
is a gray area there where so much in horror can be interpreted. There's so much gray area. And some of us present that gray area because we almost ultimately want the reader to decide who's the bad person here.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Or who is this monster really the monster? And I'm actually writing something for the first time where there's a monster of sorts. Usually my monsters are other humans or there are other situations. I learned early on that if you're able to make your setting a character, which is a classic description of Gothic literature and Gothic movies as well, if your setting can become that character, well, then you've got something else to use in your story. You've got something else to play off of. But for the first time, I'm actually going to try to create, literally and figuratively, a monster that wouldn't be found in natural life. And that to me that's a whole other area, because I seem to be able to do okay with the monsters and humans and the things they do. Now I want to see how the humans react when they're faced with something that isn't of this world.
Yeah.
And I think the world we're living in currently, you know, everything from, okay, where did the COVID virus come from? Was it made in a petri dish? You know, I recently, I had a invite submission and I had to do research, and I decided to write, and I don't want to give away the story because it isn't out yet, body brokering. Do you know there are body brokers? And you're a nurse. And fluids are regulated, blood's regulated, organs are very heavily regulated. Do you know there's no regulation of other body parts, and that there are 5 saleable body parts, each limb, the torso and the head? And I mean, you get into reading and researching some of this, there's stuff happening in our world right now. And if you Google body brokers, and it was actually, I tapped into it from a story that was in the BBC News about an elderly man whose family donated his body for science because that was what he wanted. Now, there's actually a body farm in San Antonio, which is the closest big city to me. They use it for your forensic research and that type of thing. Fascinating, but no, you can't go visit the body farm. You can walk around the perimeter. Are they going to let you go in and dig? Oh, hell no. You know, it's biosuits from head to toe, and it's strictly controlled research. But we've also got the Southwest Research Center in San Antonio, which is groundbreaking for some of the things that they discover there through their experimentation and their processes. But if you get into some of these situations, and it was a story about an elderly man whose family donated his body to science, there's no regulation as to where those body parts end up.
Yeah.
And now individuals can, in fact, and of course, there's always unscrupulous morticians, funeral directors, other people that handle the deceased. There is stuff going on right around us where these body parts are being brokered and being used and being artistically employed. And I had no idea, Marian. It wasn't until I came up with this idea for a story, having read this, that the family over in, I don't know if it was Ireland or Wales or someplace, was suing because their father basically was sold. I mean, he didn't go for some grand and glorious improvement on the human race. Basically, he was chopped up and sold to somebody that wanted to in their living room.
Yeah, he was pieced out.
Do that. So, I mean, to me, these monsters that are among us, the opportunists among us, the ones that are preying, are a whole other level of monster that needs to be tapped into. And they're as ugly as a Wolfman transformation or a Frankenstein or our classic monsters. There are monsters among us, and we've got a new description. We've got a new characterization of monsters because of the world we're living in.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of that. I mean, in your profession, you probably, you read these scientific reports and stuff. I mean, I went into the living room screaming. I was like, do you know you can sell body parts? And Mike's like, yeah. And, he raises cattle. It's their commodities to him. They're nothing to him. He takes real good care of them and then they're gone, that kind of thing. But they're actually, you are allowed by law. There are no regulations on this. To me, that's a new kind of monster that is preying on families who are indigent, or they're honoring their parents' wishes, or their family members' wishes to have their body donated to science. They're all end up in a body farm or used for experimentation that's going to find a cure for cancer.
Yes.
There are monsters out there.
Absolutely.
And this is, to me, something that's real interesting going
forward.
I
can't wait to see where that goes.
It's given us some new ammunition.
Oh yeah. Well, Ruthann, if people would like to contact you directly, where is the best place for them to do so? What do you prefer?
They can find me anywhere. I do have an active website, www.ruthannjagge.com. I try to update it. I have an Amazon author page. You can find all of my work there. I am active on Facebook, which drives me nuts, but it's the devil we love to hate. I'm on Instagram, which I really enjoy because you can do your visuals and it's kind of neat there. And I am on Twitter, which I believe is the devil, but I made some nice contacts. And I will tell anybody that's interested in breaking into the genre or breaking into writing in general, there are a lot of generous people who do post their calls, who do post their submission windows. There's a lot of information to be found on Twitter. There's no reason for you to get caught up in the drama or politics or anything else, because on my feed, I pretty much see only relates to what I do. And wonderful people, and you see new releases, but you can also get a leg up on some of the stuff that may be coming. So a lot of the publishers have a presence, and they will say, oh, this is going to open, March. This is going to open May 1st. We open for novel submissions. One of the biggest things I think a lot of us are asked are, where can I send my work? How do I get publishers to see my work? Who's submit? Twitter is probably your best source for that. There are a lot of groups on Facebook. You can take them with a grain of salt. Books of Horror does not really go into a lot of the subcalls and things. I find most of the accurate and the best information comes from Twitter. It's fast and furious.
What is your Twitter handle?
I am Redhead Writes, REDRITES, Writes, Redhead Writes at Twitter.
Perfect.
It's pretty much easy to find me. I'm very approachable. Just shoot me a message.
She is. This is true. I believe you can also.
I'm not cheap. My husband will attest to that. You guys are the best. I mean, I've loved y'all since hello. I see what you do just getting bigger and bigger and better and more exciting.
Oh, thank you.
I know you've got some guests coming up. I don't even know how Christina's going to get through Chandler.
I know. He's coming up next weekend.
This 2 months of buildup. She is probably, I will be surprised if she can get through it without hyperventilating at this point, but I know she's doing her homework and preparing. And there's just so much good stuff available, so many good things going on. And thank you.
Blast.
Thank you all for what you're doing in your busy lives, for all of us as writers and reviewers. And, there isn't really any separation. We're all just up to it to our eyeballs. Giving us a platform and a voice and good things. This is going to be a great year.
You can also find Ruthann in our Mothers of Mayhem Facebook group. So if you are looking to reach out to me or Christina or Ruthann, that is a great place to be. So you can come find all 3 of us there, the Mothers of Mayhem official Facebook group. And then by jumping in there, you can find links to all of our various social media accounts. And if you want more information on Ruthann, we're going to put as much as we can possibly fit in today's show notes. So you can look down there in today's information. You can get more details about both her and her bibliography. If you want to send us more questions, more comments, and insults, you can always send them to our email address, momextremepodcast@gmail.com. That's m.o.m.extremepodcast@gmail.com. We also have a very fun new feature, which you can find in our tagged posts on our Facebook group or at our anchor.fm, Marian and Christina. It's the Mothers of Mayhem Anchor website. You can now record a voice message for us and submit it. And you might hear that voice message spliced into an episode in the future. So please take full advantage of that. It is super fun. And we would love to have your voices included in the show. As always, do not forget to send dildos to Christina. DM me if you need her mailing address. And every week we give a huge thank you to singer-songwriter Amigo the Devil for allowing us to use his song Hungover in Jonestown as our theme. We could not have had anything that represents us better, and his support it just means the world to us. So until next time, go raise some hell, children. Make your weird book mommies proud. We love you. I love you to bits, Ruthann. Thank you so much.
Thank you, darling.
For being here.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Bye. I love you too. Bye, guys. Bye.
Life is a joke, and death is the punchline. Oh, la, 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 la. Life is a joke, and death is the punchline. Oh, la, 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 la. This life is a joke, and death is the punchline. La, 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 la. This life is a joke, and death is the punchline. Oh, la, 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 la. This life is a joke, death is the punchline.